Sharon has been part of our lives for many, many, many years. I remember seeing her in her early 90s on the television. And Sharon, good morning and welcome, from Southern California to be here at ActorCom. And I think we are going to start off with a clip that the Nashville Women in Film have put together about some of your TV work. And what we're going to do, though, we're going to talk about television, and we're also going to talk about your stage work, because you do all of it. You're a well-rounded actress. You've been through the ringer. You have done everything that probably all the actors here are just striving to be and do. And we just so appreciate you being here and taking the time this morning to do this with us. Thank you.
My
Thank you. Are
pleasure.
you doing okay? Are you ready for this?
I sure am. Thank you,
Okay.
Stacey.
Okay. All right. So, Donna, can we do the video? Let's see some of Sharon's work here. And I'm not in charge of all the tech stuff, so that will come up when it comes up. And until it comes up, I can just start chit-chatting away. So, whenever, Donna, you're ready to do the video clip, we will get that done. But until then, I just want to talk a little bit about what Sharon has done. And I've got well, of course, you're an accomplished stage actress. I've seen that you've done a lot. You like Noel Coward.
Yeah, you talk about stage. That's how I started. That's how so many of us start.
Mhm.
And those of you that are in the Southeast, I'm from North Carolina, and it was a joy to grow up when I did in the 70s. And know that the public school system supported theater, because that's how I got involved, was in school, junior high, high school, singing in choirs, whether it was church or Girl Scouts or community choirs. That's how I developed an understanding that I had an aptitude for this, and it was supported by the community, which is so important.
Do you remember the first little play you were in? The first thing you were in that your family was there clapping for you, and the first time you were on stage and just was like, oh my gosh, this is where I need to be.
Yes, it was definitely the kindergarten choir. It was that far back that I could tell that I loved doing it. And it wasn't really a surprise, because my dad had acted in high school and even in college.
There you go.
And at an outdoor drama called The Horn in the West. And I'll stop there because I think they've got the clip. Guys, for inviting.
Morning of the big night, huh, Andy? Are you ready for me to come over?
Listen, I gotta tell you something. Good morning, Lieutenant. How you doing?
Fine.
You're not gonna believe this. I mean, I can hardly believe it myself.
What, Andy?
Now, I know what you're gonna think, but the history between us, you're gonna think I'm making this up.
Andy,
and I'm
what?
not. Now, an incident has occurred at my apartment, and it is definitely not fit for visitors tonight.
I don't believe this.
No, do you want to know what happened?
No.
Hey, John,
Yeah,
good
hey,
morning.
good morning.
I already heard about the fungus in the fish tank, about the dangerous linoleum tiles.
You
out
want to
on the
know what
kitchen
happened,
floor.
yes or no?
What happened?
Well, I have a very bad gas leak.
Give it up, you old gank. Your attempts to break us up are as futile as your attempt to look younger.
Well, I don't have to attempt anything this time, because you did all the work for me, you barren bitch.
She was a pageant girl right up into her teens, and she did pretty well. And I would shuttle her back and forth between the competitions. The whole time she'd be on my case saying, Mom, you gotta do something for yourself. You know what? I do want the condo.
Next trip, huh, baby? Looks like you got you a thing for a guy named Guy.
Guy? Well, no. I want a second opinion. Get me Dick Clark.
Okay. Quite the diversity there.
Who remembers Dick Clark? You guys remember Dick Clark?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. You have just run the gamut there, Sharon. So before we did the video, thank you, Donna, and thank you, Valerie, for doing that. Before that, we were talking about how you kind of started and how it's been in your blood for a really, really long time. So let's take us through a little bit about how your journey has been from North Carolina to Los Angeles.
Well, for me, the dream was all about being in musicals. I loved singing and dancing. That clip from the series that I starred in, the sitcom, which you all, I shouldn't assume. Who knows that a sitcom is multicam and it's in front of a live audience. And they were very big in the 90s. And the singing and dancing was so ingrained in me. It's something that I had grown up doing because that's what came naturally. And like I said, my father had been in plays. My mother had a great voice. My father has a great voice. They actually met in a choir. So it was a natural result of their union and their enjoyment of that kind of activity. So I did musicals in high school, and when I went to UNC Chapel Hill to get my degree, I never actually thought that I could do this for a living. It was something that was an avocation rather than a vocation in my mind. And I didn't know anybody that was a professional in it, but my father was a journalist, and that was what made sense to me, and something that I also knew I would enjoy, because I did grow up watching him on television. So that leap from the actual person to the screen didn't seem impossible, which is important to recognize, decades down the road for me, when the time came that I actually thought about being on camera. But in those intervening years, the choice for me to spend my summers in college were always driven to opportunities to perform, because while I got my degree in journalism and I did some stage at Carolina, I wasn't declaring myself a theater major. So I didn't have an actual path that I was looking forward to as an actor. I just chose things to allow me to do something that was going to be fun and make some money. Again, in North Carolina, there are a lot of opportunities. There certainly were then outdoor dramas. Like I said, my father had been in the Horn in the West, which is in the mountains of North Carolina. There's Unto These Hills, which is also in Cherokee, North Carolina. I'm not sure how many are in your area of Tennessee, but it was also at that time, there were musical theater opportunities. And that's what I did. I worked at a place called the Farmhouse in Blowing Rock, North Carolina, singing as a singing waiter, and Jenny Wiley Summer Music Theater in Kentucky, and then at East Carolina University doing full shows. So I got a lot of stage experience there. And when I graduated from Carolina, I had made some friends that had been employed by those theater companies that lived in New York and were working in New York. And they encouraged me to come. And when I say they, I mean people who were actually making decisions about casting: musical directors, choreographers, directors. And they offered me what I consider very valuable still to this day, and I'll tell any actor that this is key, to have an unbiased, unsolicited opinion of your potential. Sometimes that comes in the form, most likely, of casting directors. I think they're very key to an actor's understanding of what their market or marketability and employability is. And I know that you'll be having casting directors on your panel tomorrow, which is terrific, because they are in the business of identifying new talent and bringing it to the decision makers. And that's really where we as professionals need to be focusing our marketing and our understanding of who is the gatekeepers, which is typically a bad word, but it's just the truth, that's a lot of that's what casting directors are hired to do, which is to make decisions about whether or not an actor is suitable for a particular project. Suitable at that point for me meant developing my skills as a singer and a dancer. And I continued to do that because that was my passion. I wasn't thinking about camera at all. And the unbiased, unsolicited opinions of directors and choreographers and musical directors led me to think, I'll take the chance. Rather than pursue my journalism opportunities, which for me was going to be Atlanta, where CNN had just started. My father had been at stations at Charlotte and Raleigh. So I understood that those opportunities would be attainable or at least conceivable to me. I never thought about New York at that point prior to, but working with people in New York made it feel not so far reach. And I had made friends, like I said, who suggested, yeah, you could sleep on a couch and start out with that gypsy mentality. And by that, I mean, and I think this is very important for actors also, is to be flexible, to pursue the opportunities where they are. And oftentimes that means leaving your nest and going someplace that you don't have deep roots. That's what an actor's job has always been, is going where the work is. And I think it's important as actors that we understand, while now in our digital age, you can audition virtually from your home, you do need to be willing and able to leave where you are to join the circus, as it were, and pursue your dreams by serving the organization and the production that you'll be working for. So I took the big leap and I went to New York, and I did sleep on couches, and I did start to audition as a non-union actor. Unions play a big part in how we develop our career. There's a lot of non-union work in the Southeast because they're right to work states. And that's very beneficial to actors breaking in, because you're not born into a union. You do have to work your way through the system, but also you have to be willing to go where the work is happening. And I went to New York, and I also had good skills as a waiter, which is important also to have support skills to be able to make a living while you are pursuing the dream. And I knew that I liked being in front of an audience because I had done so in church choir, in Girl Scouts, and on stage in my high school, and these regional theater opportunities. So I wasn't afraid to take the risk of being somewhere else using the skills and passion that I had developed. And I auditioned for a cruise ship because you didn't have to be union for that. And that was my first big break, professionally hired in New York. And once I got that opportunity and was hired in that pool of competition, I felt good about staying and pursuing. And that meant taking more classes and just knowing that every step was taking me to the next level of opportunity. And something that I know is still a very important part of my life and my work is that I never was given, luckily, a task, a job, an opportunity before I was ready for it. And that meant that my training was keeping pace with the doors that were opening. And that's really lucky and important to understand that about yourself.
Thank you. Wow, that that was a lot. So one of my questions was, what was your first big break? And I never would have thought cruise ship. Because when we all go on cruise ships, I mean, there is a talent there, and that comes from somewhere. How long did you stay on the cruise ship? And first of all, I want that question, but I love that you talked about how you continue to learn about your craft and how you continue to educate yourself about your craft, because in any job that we have, there are people that have been doing it longer, that are people that have been doing it better, and they can help us. And so with the cruise ship being your first foray into, oh my gosh, this is what I'm going to do. What was the next big opportunity that came your way that like kind of solidified your journey into the world of acting and stage and film?
Well, I was on the cruise ship for about 5-6 months, and that was just this fantasy world. You know, we were singing and dancing and we were in the Caribbean, and I didn't really worry about what the next job would be. What that did was actually, I think, give me that gap, that window of opportunity to think about how much more of the world that I wanted to see. And did I feel ready to make that big leap from the nurturing environment of my university to the being a young adult and out on my own making choices. And that's another big important step for people. Many of you have already, you know, crossed that threshold. And I was so young and kind of green, not as a performer as much as a woman. So when I got back to New York, what I had recognized is that I had to be, I mean, this is an important piece. And those of us that are women will understand. On that cruise ship, I took things for granted, really. I say that by the time I got off the cruise ship, I was cargo because we were just enjoying. We were eating, we were drinking. I wasn't really thinking about staying in that kind of warrior fighting mode. And when I got back to New York, I realized, the competition here is fierce. And I have to be prepared for that. I have to get myself in shape. And that's an important part of the job, is how do you present yourself and your equipment, because it is, in the best possible light. So I realized I had to get into tougher dance classes. I had to step up my nutrition. I had to just clean up my act. And that was part of the maturing process. And I think we all need to recognize when we have to do that, because it changes as we evolve. So I did that. I put myself in class. I got really sort of more strict with myself. And that discipline has to come from within. There's nobody doing it for you when you're an actor.
No.
You are given that that tool. Nobody is, you have to do it for yourself. And then I would audition for the jobs that I would find that were posted on our theater newsletters, like Backstage or Variety. Now a lot of them are online. There's Actors Access. There are postings that allow you to know what is happening, what's casting. So that is how I would have to work around the schedules for auditioning and doing night shifts as a waiter, or whatever work I did. Sometimes there was a job that I had where I answered phones for the nascent tech version of buying tickets online. It was called Charge It. Now it's Ticketmaster. And there were real humans answering the phone, taking those orders. And that's what I did, because I could do it at night while I trained. And then I got jobs doing shows regionally that I had auditioned for. And I was waiting tables in the 80s. And I got a call to audition for a big musical that was going on the road with Anthony Quinn called Zorba. And I bought I think I had a wig from a show that I had done in North Carolina with the theater that I helped start, that's still in existence, called the North Carolina Theater. It's in Raleigh, and some of you may know it. Some of you may have actually worked there. We only do musicals, and I had a wig from when I was playing Eliza in My Fair Lady. I got that job because I had the skills, but also I was a local talent there. And I used that dark wig to audition for this musical, which is all about Greek people. And I transformed myself so that I looked more like a villager in Greece, and I got that job. And I remember getting the call while I was waiting tables. My pager went off and I answered the call on the payphone. I'm doing this because that's what you did. You picked up the receiver. And then I was able to save the money on that tour. And it again boosted my confidence that I was ready for, big level theater with stars. And that was another important step, because working with a star requires you to up your game. And that taught me a lot about the ability to do that, and that these people who are stars are the same as I am. They are people. They're not just these two-dimensional images that you see on the screen. And that's an important shift in any actor or creator's mind, is to know that you are the same as they are. And then you can feel like you're contributing, not that you are, there's not a barrier to your creative contribution, that you have the same equipment that you must develop, but yet you are part of that ecosystem that you are serving.
So thank you for that. I love interviewing you. You just you answer all my questions. I'm running out of questions because you're answering all of them. But you did mention that you were young and green, and I want to talk a little bit about what it was like for women, for you in the 80s and 90s, as far as harassment goes, because a lot of us here we're all in the entertainment industry. I don't know if I can speak for everybody else here, but I have experienced sexual harassment in the entertainment industry workplace. How did you handle that coming up as a young and green actress in this world?
I wish I'd handled it better.
Mm.
For me, I was surprised, I suppose, in some ways and not in others, when men in positions of authority and power were so cavalier and felt so entitled as to use their power in a way that required somebody in my position, in the ensemble, or even eventually, ensemble meaning the chorus, or even in the leading roles, to have no choice as to whether or not we were going to be open to their advances. And by advances, what happens often in our industry, because it's so physical, the proximity, the work we're required to be physical with the people that we're acting opposite. And the boundaries get very blurred. In rehearsals, you're with a team of people. It's far more public. But once performances start, that's when the boundaries can be broached. And with people in power, if they are bored with their roles, or if they are just serial predators, or if they feel that their value is only in their ability to dominate, or at least part of their value is the ability to dominate, those cultures at that point did not provide really any recourse. I was in the show Fiddler on the Roof, and playing a daughter, the oldest daughter, with the star of the show, who had all the power because he had also done the film of Fiddler on the Roof. And his I believe that there is a truth to men coming up at a certain time that we all are, those of us that I see on the screen, were exposed to, men who had been given so much power and so much leeway. And so their sense of dominance and success would often allow them the opportunity to do whatever really they wanted. And I was very naive, I think, because while my job was to relate directly and have an important bond with this person playing my father, what I also didn't understand was that on the road and in those scenarios, they are the dominant figure. It didn't matter that they had a producer or a stage manager that was considered to be the authority figure for us, but not necessarily for them. And the harassment that I experienced was wandering hands, right? In the middle of scenes on stage. And there was really nothing during the performance that we were allowed to do to stop it, but it certainly affected my work. And I went to a stage manager, and they just sort of shrugged their shoulders and went, well, you know, he's the star. I'm happy to say now that with all of our unions and with the Me Too movement, I believe that behavior is far less accepted. I don't want to say that it's less frequent, but it's less accepted. There are consequences. There is recourse. I did not speak about it publicly for a long time because there was nothing that anyone was doing about it. I did not, by the time I was on television, I had galvanized myself, and I made sure that the characters that I played, that I knew how to shift that energy, and that I would never allow another figure to expect that that I would be open to anything like that. And I think now back about my behavior, it was that I would sort of smile and kind of brush it off. I mean, I'm sure you all have experienced that. You just sort of giggle and kind of run away. And I think young women now, young men, anyone who is exposed to an authority figure knows that their response is part of the equation. It's part of the energy, but also that they have a structure and a system that will allow them to have recourse. But it's tipped so far in the other direction now that we all have to balance this very carefully. Now, any director will say, "May I touch you?" when they're going to move you around, or we have to be able to physically work with each other. But now we're all used to saying, "Is it all right if I touch you? How may I touch you here?" When I've done love scenes, when I've done, you know, scenes with sexual content in years past, we would talk about how we were going to design the scene, but now there are intimacy coordinators, which is a really big part of what our union has provided. And I can answer, you know, more questions about that, but that's the evolution for me, which has it is I think a very very common story and journey from what happened in the 80s, 90s, and now in the new century of what's expected and what will not be tolerated.
Right. Speaking of questions, I just want to tell our guests that we are going to have a Q&A here shortly. And if you have a question, you can put it in the chat and Donna will read the question, or when it's time, you can raise your hand in the reactions. If you go down to the Zoom bar below where it says reactions, you click on that and there's a raise hand bar there. So you can do that when it's time for Q&A with Sharon. Thank you for that, Sharon, because yes, it's an important issue, and it is interesting how it's all evolved over the last 3 decades. With harassment, especially with the Me Too movement and what happened in Los Angeles with a certain production company and that kind of thing. So I just want to change it up here a little bit. I want to know if you can talk about what it was like for you when you did a lot of stage, did a lot of musicals, but now you're going on to film. You need an agent to get you into these casting directors and to get into these sessions. How did you get that agent, and who was that one person in your life that said, yes, that helps your career get to that next level?
My first agents in New York was a team that was dedicated to musical theater. And that's very important, is know what the agency what the fit for what you want to do is, because not every agent is interested in theater. Not every agent is interested in musical theater. Not every agent is open to doing both. And at that time, the agency was called Stone Manners, and it was Tim Stone and Scott Manners. And Tim's gone now. I think Scott may still be in the business. They saw me in a showcase, and that was a great way to be exposed to the new talent that was coming up. We all, if you're an agent, if you're a manager, and if you're a casting director, your job is to find the new talent. It's to get to nurture the talent that you have, your clients that you have, but it's also to find the new talent. And I think that what they saw in me was what was very obvious, and that was someone who was eager and had a certain skill set and was capable of taking opportunities, was hungry for them, and being able to show that and demonstrate that willingness to listen to their direction, to their thoughts, their opinions, what new headshots needed to be, because that's still important. But back then they were very important because we didn't have the digital media to show our skill set as in I don't want to say live, but action. Now actors will be able to put themselves on film, on their tapes, as it were, their reels, but that wasn't possible. So it's still the same theory, though, is help develop your materials, help pick what's right for you, open doors for you. And that's what Stone Manners did. What also happened for me over the years was to realize when I had evolved beyond what a particular talent agency was going to provide. And that happens too. And knowing who's the right fit for you at the right time is an important part of the business. Learning how to recognize the marketplace and where you fit in the marketplace is key. And I knew that as a stage actor, I was very versatile. I could buy a wig, dress up, and be convincing as a Greek woman. I also, for another show, Cabaret with Joel Grey, which when that was auditioning, I spent some money that I had on the right kind of outfit, which was, about that 1930s style, that sort of corset look, which I didn't have in my closet. I invested in it so that I would look more appropriate for the show. I was always willing to do that. That's still what I'm good at. I will transform. That's what I enjoy. I don't really play myself kind of anywhere, but transformation is important. Other actors sometimes have a hard time convincing their agents and managers of that they can transform. And frankly, for camera, that isn't something that we are encouraged to do as much. And on camera, we're encouraged to play closer to ourselves, to our look, to our energy, which continues to change as we age, as we evolve, as we transform our bodies for whatever way. I mean, just looking at those clips that you had pulled together, the difference between that NYPD Blue look and the Dynasty look, and the energy, just alone, that the maturation, the playing the good woman to playing the villain, those things we have to sometimes convince our reps that we can do. So I would encourage you to, as you're developing your reel, give that range, that dynamic. Sometimes it's just pulling your hair back. Sometimes it's putting yourself in a different environment in your house as you're creating your reels. And I needed to do that with my agents, is to say, I'm ready to do something else, and see if they're willing to go along. Sometimes they will be, sometimes they won't. And you can ask casting directors how far they see your capability of stretching, how you change your vocal quality to be convincing in a different role. So those tools are up to you to find where you're marketable, and then go beyond those boundaries a bit to show something different, to show your capacity and how it can be stretched.
So that's a great segue into, let's see the clip of Sharon doing Catherine Graham in the Shot, which is an amazing play that you, Sharon, you helped create this role.
Well, I'll set this up a little bit for
Okay.
you. Catherine Graham, for those of you who may not know, was the publisher of the Washington Post during the Pentagon Papers era and the Watergate era. So that was the 70s is when she really came into her power. Her father had owned the paper, which was, when he bought it, the 5th worst rated newspaper in Washington, D.C. But he elevated it in the 1940s and 50s. And she married a very bright man, Philip Graham, who became the publisher of the Post in 1948 and elevated it even more. And sadly, he suffered from bipolar disorder that was untreated. At the time, mental illness was certainly, they didn't have the pharmaceuticals to help treat it, and they didn't really speak about it. It was so closeted. And bipolar disorder, any of you all that know about it, it is so difficult to treat. And sadly, he committed suicide in 1963 in their home, their country home. And they were very, very powerful people in the inner circles in Washington, D.C. They influenced with their reach. I say they because they were more of a team than you might recognize. Although she was a housewife and raising their kids, she was quite the hostess in D.C. So she was very engaged and involved in the power of politics and the influential people in that town. But she was still a shyer woman and never really imagined dominating and controlling in the world. But he, after committed suicide, she wanted to keep that paper in her family. So she took over the paper 3 days. And you'd probably recognize her if you looked at photographs from that era. She's the one that hired the editor and made the choices to allow Bob Woodworth and
Bernstein.
Carl Bernstein to run with this investigation. But her story about the domestic violence in her marriage was untold. I got involved by the playwright, who is a woman who was 65 when she wrote her first play. She was an attorney in the labor unions for 20 some years in DC. So she knew about the inner circles and the workings of power of the media. And she traveled with people who knew the Grahams personally. And as David Gergen, who many of you may know, said, "Oh yeah, we all knew that he knocked her around." She didn't speak of it, but other people knew. We developed this at the Ojai Playwrights Conference, which is 20 years old now. And our 5 years ago is when she had developed this play, submitted it. It was accepted. And we developed it there with a female director. The playwright's name is Robin Gerber. She writes on women's leadership and has written biographies about Catherine Graham, about Eleanor Roosevelt, and turned this into a play, the segment of her life, which was sort of unexplored even by Catherine herself. And Michelle Joyner is our director, and we have been traveling this play around the country. We won the Solo Festival in New York in 2021, the fall of 2021, and we've traveled it around, and we're now working on our off-Broadway gig, or that will happen, we hope, next fall. And you'll see now a bit of the story of The Shot.
Okay, great. All right, Donna, Valerie, are we ready to show that? And thank you, Sharon, for giving us such a...
Guns. Phil always said they were just a part of country life. Like mice in the pantry, or quiet nights, or star-clouded skies. It's quite unlike the city out here, of course. All the car horns in Georgetown and the sirens and people. Oh, and you know, sound is like gossip. It travels a lot farther than you think. But here in the vaunted Virginia countryside, here, there is quiet. And the occasional gunshot. I learned about River Run from a friend. It was built before the Civil War. Timber and stone and big porches all around. And I knew that Phil would love the history of it. He'd smell it in the boards, he'd say. We had been searching for a country retreat. 3 years had flown by since 1948 when Father gave Phil the Washington Post. Yes, you heard right. My father gave my husband the paper. But that was okay. Phil took over, he ran it. And he ran himself into the ground, too. What with exposing Truman's White House scandal and the communist aggression overseas, and then that terrifying Orwell book, 1984, that became the talk of the town, just as Joe McCarthy started his communist witch hunt. How did such a liar and a bully ever get elected to the United States Senate?
How did such a liar and a bully get elected to the United States Senate? Yeah, there's a lot of those questions going around right now. So was that a wig that you had on?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Speaking
Well,
of
and that's-
transformation.
I'm sorry, what?
I said, speaking of transformation, that's
Yes.
quite the transformation.
And that's the way Katharine Graham always wore her hair. She was sort of famous for that helmet hair. And it was important for me to feel like someone, not just someone else, because I do that a lot. And I played a lot of, sometimes I played real women. I played Amelia Earhart, in Star Trek Voyager, and I needed a wig for that. And then I played Vivian Leigh in a play about Orson Welles and Laurence Olivier, and I had to transform. I don't look like any of those women, but maybe those of you who are actors understand this. If I get the hair right and the shoes right, that for me is what allows me to feel different in my body, to see it in the mirror reflected, and then feel the stride, feel the way I move in the world of that play, of that piece as that person. And maybe you'll note those are flat shoes. She was very tall and she always wore flats, just standing differently. The hair and the wig, it is part of her armor, and it informs the fact that Katharine Graham was always pulled in tight. And in the story, we see her unravel and finally reveal the domestic abuse that she was suffering from, that she never really talked about in her real life, but that we know happened. And it is a story that is so way too common, but many women in these privileged worlds would never speak about. So her getting that hair that closed her in, that capped her emotion, is also part of what I think helps me when I have to reveal, because I do. In this play, I strip down to show the bruises. And I have to say, Sharon, I'm not comfortable doing that, but when I've got that wig on and when I have her body in me, I feel empowered, emboldened, and even responsible for showing the damage and for taking the risk of showing the damage publicly.
So how would you prepare for a role like this as compared to something for television or film, like your Joe Pickett role? What's the difference as far as acting goes?
Right. Joe Pickett is a television series that's now on Paramount Plus, and it's a best-selling book series. And Missy, as described in the book, is different than I look physically. And we thought about, should we change my hair color to look more like Missy, who's a raven-haired? But when I auditioned for this, and I did because it was pandemic days, and I did it here in this room with my backdrop, and they knew what I looked like, but what I brought to it was an energy that they knew they could use as Missy, which is this imperious quality, this spontaneous, unfiltered, powerful rapier quality. And she's also an alcoholic and a juvenile in her responses, in a way, in the way they had written her, which is different from the book. In the book, Missy is she's very controlled. She does drink, but she never loses her cool. In the television series, and I think this is important to answer your question, they needed Missy to be more of a comic relief, more to dilute the tension of the action sequences and the stress and strain on Joe Pickett's character and the family. And they also cast we're looking at a leading actress who's Missy's daughter that looked more like me, Sharon. She's actually from me bringing myself to it, just the way I looked, also was easier than having to dye my hair or put a wig on. In camera, it's tougher. It just takes more time in the hair and makeup chair. It's already, for a woman playing this sort of elevated, always looking great until she's too, drunk and falling apart. That's 2 hours just off the bat. So you don't want to add on time to that. So I prepared Missy with showing them that I could be elegant and loose and kind of spontaneous. That was really important to show. To prepare this role as Catherine, I wanted a dress that kept me more in sort of a straight line, this column figure that she is. I have over time, that was a very early version of the life of that play. Now I have much more handle on the way she sounds, the way Catherine Graham sounds. I worked with a dialect coach. I am far more still as I play her now. There's Catherine Graham looks up. She was dominated as a child by her mother and shy as a person. There's a lot more. I've adapted her the way she holds her head and looks underneath her eyebrows rather than out in the world. That's me. I'm like this, but I had to learn to play Catherine more pulled in, stiffer around the neck, and using her eyes as to where she senses a threat or danger, but she's very still here, much more focused, like a sight on that shotgun or on a rifle. It's all about adapting physically. There's a teacher that I think I know she's accessible to anybody that's listening to this. Her name is Miranda Harcourt. She's a New Zealand-based acting coach, and she talks a lot about technique and learning material in the environment that is that the actual action takes place is very helpful. That's there are ways that we learn lines. There's the just learning material or information from a page, from a book. There's learning it by movement. I'm a kinetic learner, so I walk a lot while I'm learning my lines. I find that it helps rather than just being on a page and sitting down. Now, as I've aged, in order to keep them in my brain, I used to just look at the page and it kind of jump like this. That was what it was like when I was in my 20s. Now I move while I'm doing it, but I also write the lines down. That's how I help learn it, because this is kinetic. If I can't get out and walk and learn them, I do it this way, just moving through my body. And another way to do it is to put yourself in the environment, like take a monologue that happens in a kitchen and learn it and do it in the kitchen, because the experience of being in the environment, like you saw on our set, really does help you create more reality for yourself and imbuing the smells or things that you know that the audience may not know, but it comes through your embodiment.
I'm just in awe. I mean, just the technicality that you're talking about in each role that you've taken on is just astounding. And it's not just about going into the room and reading; it's about embodying these characters that you were doing. You talked about getting older in the business. And by the way, if you anybody who's watching here, if you've got a question for Sharon, we're gonna in a few minutes here, we're gonna go to Q&A. You can either raise your hand in the reactions, or you can put a question in the chat, and we'll do it that way. You talked about how it evolves for you over the decades. So let's talk just a little bit about ageism and how that is affecting you as an actress in film, TV, and on stage. And how does it help you define what kind of roles that you decide you want to get yourself involved with right now?
I have to say, I feel very, very fortunate in that I broke into the film and television business as a grown-ass woman. I was 30, and I knew myself, and I had already let go of the idea of ingenue and youth being my superpower, because it wasn't. And I think I always felt, again, that transformation because I did stage so much. I didn't have to be me looking in the mirror to feel capable of telling a story. And I encourage all of you who are storytellers to project into the future. Do that exercise. See what kind of qualities you think that you will be glad to bring to a story when you're older, who it is, and the types of characters, the types of stories that you value now, that you feel inspired by now, and project yourself into that rather than have it kind of creep up behind you. Because I'm now no longer surprised. When I was auditioning for this character of Missy and Joe Pickett, and she's a grandmother, it didn't surprise me. I didn't like go, oh God, a grandmother? Sure, I'm 62 years old. You bet I can be a grandmother. But the kind of grandmother that I could be doesn't make me feel diminished as I am telling the story of this person, and nor should it. Because I do a play every year. I mean, this play, The Shot, is a solo play, and I'm playing multiple characters in it. Later on in the play, I play her mother, I play her husband, and I change myself physically for that. If you can allow yourself to really be someone else physically, ageism won't take you by surprise, because you will become someone else. You will see your face change. HD was harder for me than playing a grandmother, because in HD, those of you who are young will know, you see every part of your face, whether it's flattering or not, whether it's a blemish or a wrinkle. And I wish that were not the reality that we have to deal with on camera. There are technical aspects to the business that have gotten better about that. It doesn't look so harsh, but learn your face on camera. Do accept it. Figure out what lighting works for you as an actor. I taught a lot of women on Zoom calls when the pandemic first happened. I'm part of a lot of women's organizations. I really respect what you all do, and I'm always here to serve. I say yes all the time. And that I mention this because as women, they were turning on their Zooms for the first time, and they didn't like what they saw because their lighting was overhead lighting. I've got an overhead light here, but I'm using a ring light now, a Zoom light, a ring for Zoom. We all know how to do that now, but we didn't necessarily know. Figure out what works for you as your face is changing. And at the same time, be willing to play your age, to look your age, to transform into a character that looks different than you. Don't be afraid of it, because it's just one version of the story that you're telling. Writers, the same. tell the stories that you know that aren't about filtering. Use all of what you know, because there's a power in it, there's a wisdom in it, there's a relatability in it. And I am grateful when I get a chance to do something that stretches me. That's why I said yes to the shot. It's not flattering, it's not filtered, it's hard, but it's real, and it gives me great pride and pleasure that I'm working with women who we're all now over 60, and it's the best collaboration that I've ever been part of, which is why now 6 years later, we're still doing it. And finding your team and who you know, because women at this stage of life, they know how to do so many things. And I do believe we are so much better at collaborating when we have practiced it, and because we practiced it. And I'm grateful that I continue to work at this stage. There may be fewer roles, but I know that when women are writing them, and when we are now on social media, we see the range of what it means to be a woman in her 60s, 70s, 80s. We now know that those stories are going to be celebrated, and I'm going to tell them as long as I can.
Oh, just gave me chills. You talk about the women's organizations that you were in, and I know there recently was a Women in Film event in Los Angeles that you were at. So, and also on your Instagram page, you post a little blurb about what it was like for women writers to be in the industry 50 years ago. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because the fact that there was hardly a woman got half a credit on a TV show because her husband happened to be one of the writers.
Right. This was in 1973. It was the year of the woman. And at our Women in Film event, I learned something that I didn't understand, that there have been so many years of the women. And it, as maybe it was Sue Cameron and Jane Fonda was there too. And they say, we don't want a year of the woman anymore. It shouldn't be celebrated like it's a rare thing. It should be, all the years should be the years of everybody. But at that time, the year of the woman was, it was ironic for women in film and television, because only one woman got a credit for writing a television series. And there were, in the Writers Guild, there were like 2,500. I'm maybe making that. I think it's maybe 2,100. Some people, members of the Writers Guild. Correct me there if you've got that figure, Stacey.
Yeah, it was I think about 2,600 members of the Writers Guild, and only 406 were women.
Right, and they were not even given screen credit for writing. So what happened was Sue Cameron, who was a reporter, had somebody who was a member of the Writers Guild, a woman, snuck that stat out of their files, out of the head office at the Writers Guild, and passed it to her. Sue said at the Women in Film event in LA a couple of nights ago, and she published it. And she said, I knew that it was going to blow up and that my life would change. And indeed it did. And when Teachie Wilkerson saw this, she said, we've got to do something about it. So they gathered about 60 women in the business in their living room, and they knew the way to get attention was to give somebody an award. And women in film have always known that. That's how you get focus of the media on a subject. And they gave Lily Tomlin the first Women in Film award. And she joked the other night, because she was there, saying she'd never even done a film yet. She had been on television and on stage. But it took, this many years, 50 years, for us to have reached the level where now we have not just a lot more women writing television and film, but a lot of women of color leading as head writers, as showrunners. That's a huge leap. And women of color as studio executive levels, but we still make 38% less than the men. I want to include all genders in this, transgender, gender fluid people. We are advocating for all of that, all people who identify as women, and we've come a long way, but we still are not earning nearly. Parity is not there. So when we know that women are 50% of over 50% of the world's population, we haven't caught up, but we'd like to make women in film obsolete. That's the goal. This need for advocacy is for it to be something that is embedded in our culture. So we leave that not just to those of us that have worked for decades to do it. I've been part of Women in Film for 25 years, close to 25 years now. But the young women, we need them, and those who identified.
And that is happening if you read about what Taylor Swift has been doing as far as getting the women involved and empowering them and getting the Gen Xers to vote, to get them to vote, because enough is enough already for a lot of this. So if you have any questions for Sharon, please put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we can call on you. I did have somebody text me with a question, Sharon. She says, when you get to your level of acting, how many people do you have on the business side of your team? Who do you have working for you, like lawyers, agents, and all those people that get percentages? And how does that all work?
That's a good question. It's evolved for me. I currently have an agent and a management team. I've had managers, as you may or may not know, managers, if they can produce, agents are not allowed to produce. But managers are also not allowed to negotiate your contract. Managers cannot negotiate, agents can. So it's a different track that they serve, different functions that they serve, although they must work in tandem. I think there's a time and a place for management. You don't always need management, because that will take another. Agents can only take 10% of your earnings. Managers they're freer to negotiate, whether it's 5, 10, sometimes more. And that's up to you. But agents are more regulated. They're not allowed to produce, but they are the ones that are to negotiate. Although an entertainment attorney can also negotiate your contracts for you. There are high level actors that now, especially if they have their own production companies, they'll only use an attorney. Most of us here on this call won't be at that level. But if you, there was one point where I had all three, and it was very expensive. And that was when I had 2 different series, NYPD Blue and Fired Up, the sitcom I was on 2 different networks at the same time. So that was a tricky thing to manage, that I was actually beholden to 2 different entities. And so that needed to be structured so that no one would had the ability to sue me or to claim any more of my time than the other. I don't have an attorney now. I do have an accountant, and that's important because the way we are paid and the pay structure and the way we pay taxes is important. If you are earning enough money, you may need to incorporate so that you can run your business expenses through a corporation. I've done that for a long time, and that's important and valuable because every time, I have to color my hair because I do. The characters that I play require that. I do have a gray wig, though, that I will use for things. And there may be a time that I go that route. Although sadly, unlike Stacey, your silver hair looks beautiful on you, just like mine does not. I put it on. It doesn't suit my coloring. But that's expensive. My point is, I invest in wigs. They're expensive. Those things, my workouts, it's important that I can filter that. But for an agent and a manager, the manager, when you're just starting out, can introduce you to people. Agents don't tend to maybe have that much time because they represent a lot more people than a manager would. If you're going to go with a manager, make sure they have a smaller roster and that they really focus on what you do so that they're the right fit for you. It's like using a tool in a kitchen. You don't want to cut an onion with a spoon. You need to be precise with your representation and find a manager that fits what you do. Agents might have a wider breadth of types of clients, but you want a manager to really focus on your category, I think.
Great. Thank you for that. That's great advice. Diana asks, other than knowing your lines and being a good human, do you have any on-set advice you've learned for ways to be an excellent collaborator and teammate when working on a big set?
Know your nervous system so that when you spend 7 hours waiting to shoot your scene and it's now 2 a.m, that you understand what it takes to bring yourself to the level of emotional honesty and capacity to serve the story. You only you know what that takes. Does it take relaxation up to that point? Does it take music to get yourself back into that headspace? Does it take are you somebody that has to chat it up because you know you got to keep that stimulus going? It will depend on the story you're telling, of course, and what your role is in it, but you have to know what it means to get yourself in the zone where you can be private in public. That's our job. Know how to drop your breath down into your body. You have to understand that about yourself. It's your equipment, and you're the only one that can know how to manage it, and you better be responsible for it. And sometimes that takes screwing it up and knowing, well, that didn't work. I talked too much, or I got too sleepy, or I need to do yoga. I need to have the ADs, that's the assistant directors, tell me when we think it's about an hour out, so I can put my costume on early enough for me to really feel like I'm in it. Those things only you can know, but they can't do it for you. You have to do it.
That's great advice. Also, real quick, going back to the manager, the question is, at what point do you know when you need to bring a manager into your team?
If you feel like you're not getting the focus and the attention of your agency, sometimes it's just because they're too busy. But it's a tough one because you're paying money. And I learned, because I knew that the management company had offices in New York and LA. That said something to me. That said they cared about theater. I met them because they had come to see a play with another client that was in the play. So that spoke to me about what they valued. But that changes too. You know, I had a manager for a long time, and I began to realize that that person was no longer interested in being out in the world and taking me with them and going to parties and events, because at the time that is how you met people, and move them beyond just seeing you on the screen and in a certain way. That's, I think, what it is. It's about the relationships that they will be opening up to you. So find out who, you know, what circles that they move in, because this is a business about relationships. And you want you want those doors to be open. If they're at film festivals, that's, I think, a great place to meet people. I've always been impressed with the people that spend their time and energy to go to festivals and to meet other people. And you can tell a lot about a rep as to how they move within that world and what they're looking for, and who they have brought into their professional circles.
Great, thank you. We have time for one more question. What advice would you give your 15-year-old self about the acting business?
It's a long game. It's not about right now. Being prepared right now is important, but this is a long game, and you never know what's around the next corner. This business is about staying flexible, keeping your knees bent. And I'm somebody that's so spontaneous. So, you know, that's my superpower and my Achilles heel. But that spontaneity means that I'm not thinking 5 years ahead, or, you know, 5 weeks ahead, but it is part of what this business requires. Some people have to plan. That's the way they function, and that's good. You can plan in this business, and it will serve you well to do so. But spontaneity is also a good quality to have. And if you have it, nurture it, know that it can serve you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sharon. You have been an amazing guest. I'm just so grateful that I was asked to interview you and that you said yes to be here. And thank you for Donna, for the connection. Linda, yes. Donna, Valerie, do we have any final words here from the Nashville Women in Film team?
Great show. Loved it.
Will this be available later for us to share?
Yeah, we'll figure that out. We are recording.
Great. I'm glad. I would be happy to do so.
Fascinating. I wish I had heard all that when I was 18.
I know. You're a fabulous mentor, Sharon. I mean, any young actor would be it would be just so, just to hear your words. I'm not an actress. I have no desire to be in front of a camera, except when I'm doing these things. But your advice and the education that you have gathered over the years on both stage and film is just astounding. And I really appreciate you being here today.
Well, I appreciate the writers who are responsible for creating those stories to begin with, the directors who know how to orchestrate and pull the best out of us, and all the members of Women in Film everywhere around the globe who have committed themselves to supporting and advocating and creating opportunities for each other. I say yes to women all the time. Women in Film is why I said yes to the women who created the shot. So if you're a woman in this business, say yes to other women. That's the only way we get things done. We don't do this as a solo business. So say yes, especially at the beginning of someone's career. And I'm grateful that I learned that from Women in Film.
Thank you, Sharon.
Very much.
Thank you so much. Okay.
So we're going to say goodbye, and we'll go on later on. About an hour from now, we have another show. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, Sharon.
Everybody.
And enjoy your weekend, everybody.